The flight had been uneventful until the pilot announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, there is no cause for alarm, but for the last 3 hours we have been flying without the use of a radio compass, radar or navigational beam due to a breakdown of a key component. In a word, we are lost. But you will be glad to know that we are making excellent time." This story, almost certainly apocryphal, reminds us of something we need to hear. Speed without direction can lead to disaster. And many people are speeding through their lives with no idea where they're heading. No true Christian would want to look back on their life and feel that they have filled a space but not achieved anything of value. Just a hyphen between two dates on a tombstone. That's why we are taking time in the little book of Jude. He is a man on a mission. He doesn't want our Christian experience to be spoiled, but to be a growth curve, to be effective, to be useful. And what he wrote is considered so valuable, God saw fit to include it in his holy word. You know, I've noticed that in recent years, winter flu injections are offered to the elderly. Thousands of people flock to the centres because of a strong warning about influenza. We are very health conscious. Unfortunately, not enough to watch our diets and to exercise, but at least in respect to disease. But you know that our spiritual community is as susceptible to disease as is the human body. And yet most Christian people are oblivious to that threat. As much as we need physicians for our bodies, we have an even greater need for analysts of our faith communities. And Jude, the half-brother of our Lord, is one of God's chosen consultants. The book isn't pleasant in its tone because of traitors in the church, apostates. An apostate is one who has completely abandoned the faith. However, my purpose isn't to cause us to become paranoid and suspicious of the person sitting next to us in church services, but it's essential for us to be watchful, especially as we choose new leaders. And it's true that those who fail to learn from the mistakes of the past are condemned to repeat them. That's why Jude knows he is repeating something that they already know, but they need to hear it again because they could easily drift into dangerous waters. So he says, though you already know all this, I want to remind you. I don't often have to tell people my age about the importance of reminders. Many of us around my age have photographic memories. We're just out of film. So to compensate, we have various ways of reminding ourselves. Little electronic gadgets beep at us. Post-it notes cover our desks. I hope we will allow the scriptures to remind us of some very important truths. We're looking at Jude verses 5 to 11. Though you already know all this, I want to remind you that the Lord delivered his people out of Egypt, but later destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. In the very same way, these dreamers pollute their own bodies, reject authority, and slander celestial beings. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to bring a slanderous accusation against him, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." Yet these men speak abusively against whatever they do not understand, and what things they do understand by instinct, like unreasoning animals. These are the very things that destroy them. Woe to them! They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for profit into Balaam's error. They have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. This goes back to the Exodus and Genesis, even back to before the earth was. Jude's audience was very familiar with these stories. We may be less so, but we need to be familiar with them. If we're going to learn all the lessons God has for us, we need to know this. The message Jude seems bent on communicating is all of Scripture reminds us that those who get involved in apostasy face certain judgment. I guess a question we ask is, if the end result for these false teachers and traitors is so awful, why do some genuine believers remain in apostate denominations long after the gospel has ceased to be taught? Oh, I know there are a few who stay as undercover missionaries, and I understand that. But the fact is, many stay because it's easier to stay than to leave. Some pastors stay because of their pension. Some people stay because they have family or friends there. Others because it's comfortable. These Christians are a lot like Lot's wife, who was slow leaving Sodom and Gomorrah, that she got turned into a salt statue when God brought fire down upon those cities. When Jesus told us to be the salt of the earth, he wasn't thinking of Lot's wife as a positive example. Now, Jude opens this section with 3 stories from early Bible history, which all have the same moral. Based on past history, apostates face certain judgment for their unbelief and their immorality. Example number 1, the ancient Israelites were destroyed. The Lord delivered his people out of Egypt, but later destroyed those who did not believe. He told them they would wander in the desert for almost 40 years until everyone over 20 had died. Again and again they had tested God. Again and again he had forgiven them for their disobedience and unfaithfulness, but God will not delay his judgment forever. You see, there comes a point when unbelief must be dealt with. That's as true today as it was 3,500 years ago. Example number 2, the evil angels were incarcerated. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. What in the world is this all about? Well, clearly Jude isn't talking about all angels, just evil angels or demons. And he's not even talking about all evil angels, but just a certain group of them who did something so bad that God put them in a dark dungeon and bound them with chains until the final great judgment, without any chance of parole. Originally, God created only holy angels, but at some point in the far past, as hinted at in Isaiah, Ezekiel, and the book of Revelation, one of the choicest and most gifted of the angels, named Lucifer, decided to stage a coup against God. And a large number of angels, perhaps 1/3 of the total number, followed him in his rebellion and became what we know as demons or evil spirits. It seems that angels had only one opportunity to turn against God. If they remained faithful to him, they were confirmed in their holiness for the rest of eternity. If they fell, they were confirmed in their wickedness forever. There is no plan of redemption for evil angels, no second chance. Evil angels or demons are Satan's servants today, but not all of them are loose to do his bidding. Some have been imprisoned by God. And why? The key to understanding is the lead up to Noah's flood in Genesis 6. Now, whatever it was that happened, it was so despicable in God's sight that he killed off the entire human race except for Noah and his family and started over. What would cause God to do this? I believe the sons of God mentioned in Genesis were fallen angels. Every other time that phrase, sons of God, is used in the Old Testament, it clearly refers to angels. I believe they possessed the bodies of some wicked men and had sexual relations with some women, producing a race of beings that were demon possessed from birth, called Nephilim, or giants. And as judgment for this ungodly liaison, God not only eliminated the bulk of the human race, he also imprisoned the evil angels who participated. He has kept them in darkness, bound with chains, awaiting the final judgment. Again, the message is clear. If God judges apostate angels this harshly, do we think he's going to close his eyes at apostasy in the church? Example number 3, Sodom and Gomorrah were wiped out. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. Now, the perversion has some parallel to what the angels did, namely violating God's established order. Let's clear up what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah and something caused God to wipe them out. Well, you can read the story in Genesis. It's a Bible story, not for children, but clearly the fundamental sin that took place there was sexual perversion. And Jude's conclusion is they, the Solomonites and the Gomorrites, serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. We need to take a moment and say something to anyone who might be struggling with sexual and moral issues. I want to say clearly, God doesn't hate you, but loves you. Nor is this passage predicting the punishment of eternal fire on those who may have immoral tendencies. Every one of us has tendencies in our nature that are evil tendencies, which if acted upon are going to get us into big trouble. Some have the temptation to lie, others struggle with lust for the opposite sex, others with gluttony or greed, and still others with anger. I'm not suggesting that these tendencies are all equal in their seriousness or consequences. But I am suggesting that none of us is free of temptation or addiction. It's when we feed our fantasies or act on them that we cross over into sin. The real tragedy is that so many religious apostates have surrendered any commitment to biblical morality on the issue of sexuality. They have decided that morality is relative, to be determined by a particular culture and society. So here is Jude's message to us. Though you already know about the ancient Israelites, the angels who sinned, and Sodom and Gomorrah, I need to remind you that based upon these historical events, apostates face certain judgment for their unbelief and their immorality, and also certain judgment for their blasphemy. In the very same way, these dreamers pollute their own bodies, reject authority, and slander celestial beings. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to bring a slanderous accusation against him, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." In contrast to the archangel Michael, apostates speak abusively and ignorantly against things they do not understand. There is no Old Testament reference to this debate with the devil. It's a quotation from the book called The Assumption of Moses. Whether Jude is quoting directly or whether he was sanctioning an oral tradition, we can't know for sure. Doesn't really matter. The significant thing is the truth that Jude states under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. That Jude is quoting an apocryphal book should not cause a problem. When a preacher quotes Martin Luther, it does not mean he is accepting all that Luther said, but just that statement. Here is the contrast between these false teachers and Michael. They threw their authority around. Michael refused to do this. Modesty is an angelic virtue. Insignificant people always want to be recognized. They reveal their weakness by their pretentiousness. What an example Michael is for us. He behaved as though he had no competence of his own. We stand the tallest when we abandon all power and glory. Never take the devil on or match wits with him. Take cover behind Christ. The defense for a believer against Satan's attack is a firm confidence in the blood of the Lamb. Deuteronomy tells us that the Lord buried Moses somewhere in the land of Moab, and nobody knows the whereabouts of his sepulchre. But we do know what happened after Michael's dispute with the devil. We do know that when Jesus was transfigured, Elijah and Moses were talking to him. Arrogance and ignorance are two common characteristics of religious apostasy, and whenever arrogance and ignorance are joined at the hip, they produce bizarre results. Dogmatic statements such as, Jesus never predicted he would return to earth in a second coming, Jesus didn't compose the Lord's Prayer, and much more. This is ignorance compounded by arrogance. That's all it is. There is not a shred of evidence for what these so-called scholars are claiming. Slandering celestial beings is not an issue we deal with much today, unless it be the fact that apostates regularly deny the existence of a personal devil and routinely question even the existence of angels or demons. Jude contrasts any blasphemy of celestial beings with the behavior of Michael the archangel. When Moses died, God decided to handle the burial himself on Mount Nebo, a remote desert mountain just across the Jordan River from Israel, so no one would know where he was buried, presumably, so no one could build a shrine there and start worshipping his bones. Apparently, God assigned the actual burial to Michael. But in the process of carrying out the task, Satan opposed Michael. I don't know why. Maybe Satan knew the value of Moses' bones in promoting idolatry among the Israelites. Not that they needed much help. So here we have the highest of the good angels disputing with the highest of the evil angels. But Michael respected Satan's power sufficiently that he refused to speak arrogantly or slanderously toward the devil. He didn't order him away or claim authority over him. Instead, he said, "The Lord rebuke you." In contrast to Michael's caution, apostates speak abusively against things they do not understand. And then Jude adds that apostates end up being destroyed by the things they do understand, namely the animal instincts they live by. Morality is placed on a discount and lives are destroyed. Religious leaders encourage abortion and children's lives are destroyed. But don't get me wrong, these religious radicals are not all bad. They do care about turtle eggs. And they do care about the rainforest. Just a note of sarcasm there, in case you didn't pick it up. And coming to the final part of our text, based on past history, apostates face certain judgment for their disobedience and rebellion. And here Jude offers 3 more historical examples. The first is Cain. He was the first murderer, the first apostate, the first one who completely abandoned God and God's way. Abel brought a blood sacrifice, but Cain brought a grain sacrifice. Abel's was accepted by God, but not Cain's. And so Cain murdered his brother. It's possible that God had made it clear, even at this early stage in the human race, that a blood sacrifice is the only kind that could atone for sin. But Cain had a better idea. He would do his own thing. A blood sacrifice was too, well, primitive. If indeed the term primitive makes any sense when referring to the first family. Are you aware that one common characteristic of virtually all apostates in the church is the rejection of the sacrificial atonement of Christ? You will hear occasionally of the cross, but if you listen closely, the cross is treated as just an example of love. It's not the once for all sacrifice for sins. After all, man is essentially good. So he doesn't need atonement. He just needs examples to follow so he can reach his full potential. Apostates have taken the way of Cain. Second, they have rushed for profit into Balaam's error. Now, Balaam has the distinction of being the only man in Scripture to be rebuked by an ass. He saw ministry as an opportunity to get rich. This is a characteristic of apostates in the church as well. There is a lot of money in religion for those who want to milk it, but Balaam has an even blacker mark on his record. He seduced Israel into sexual immorality. Apostates are often guilty on this score as well. Their lax attitude towards living together, pornography, etc. It's a loud message to their congregations. If it feels good, do it. Just don't hurt the environment. And then there's the example of Korah. He was a rebel at heart. Korah was a Levite who wasn't satisfied with being a Levite. He wanted to be a priest also. He developed the idea that the people of God are a democracy. He wanted total equality. Here's how he expressed it as he opposed Moses and Aaron. You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly? Well, the reason Moses was leading was because God appointed him the leader. But Korah felt Moses should run for office. He had no right to assume authority. In our case, God, through his word, must be our ultimate authority. And it has to be said that about the only thing that will eliminate you from being ordained in many denominations today is a belief in the authority of the Scriptures. That these words will not be tolerated. Well, I've painted a pretty bleak picture of the apostasy of the Christian church and what it's facing today, haven't I? I believe that I've told just half of the truth. Men do not reject the Bible because it contradicts itself, but because it contradicts them. An historical review of biblical scholarship during the past century will reveal that the first to question the authority of Scripture, deity of the Jesus Christ, and bodily resurrection of our Lord are those who are commenting from inside the visible church. And the damage has been enormous. Much of the rejection of Christianity today has been built on the rejection of yesterday. The theology on offer is a Dalmatian theology, one holding that the Bible is inspired only in spots. About 100 years ago, a young man was an earnest preacher to the poor in and around London. He wrote in a letter dated the 13th of October 1876, "Last Monday I was again at Richmond and my subject was, 'He has sent me to preach the gospel to the poor.' But whoever wants to preach the gospel must first carry it in his own heart." His favourite reading, apart from the Bible, were the writings of Charles Spurgeon. His favourite hymn was, "Tell me the old, old story of Jesus and his love." The young man was born in Holland in 1853. His father was a Lutheran pastor. In 1873, he took the opportunity of moving to the London branch of the firm of art dealers for whom he worked. He fell in love with his landlady's daughter, but she was indifferent to him. He turned to Jesus for comfort and discovered in him real support. Soon he was helping the local Methodist minister by taking meetings. In 1877, he responded to the growing conviction that he should become a full-time preacher of the gospel. He returned to his native Holland to begin training for the ministry. The academic demands of the theological college at Amsterdam were too much for him. He transferred to a newly opened school for evangelists in Brussels. His preaching was received well by the poor with whom he tried to identify in dress and care. Sadly, the church leaders of the day spurned him, discouraged and frustrated his efforts. He left the ministry and eventually was even to lose his faith. Returning to the art world, he tried his hand at painting. His name was Vincent van Gogh. Think of the loss to the proclamation of God's Son. Vincent van Gogh said, "I must tell you that with evangelists it is the same as with artists. There is an old academic school, tyrannical men who wear prejudice and conventions." Jude saw the emergence of this in his century. Men not content simply to treat the faith with amiable neglect. They want to mock and despise it as unintelligent. But I must ask the question, so what? What does this mean to us as a seemingly solid church? What it means is that history repeats itself, and if we are not constantly on guard, even we can leap into the abyss of apostasy. So how can we be vaccinated against it? How do we defend the faith against apostasy? First, conquer biblical illiteracy. I use battle terminology because this is war. If we do not know these Old Testament stories, there is no way we could know the lessons found in them. Biblical illiteracy is dangerous. It can be fatal. I challenge every person to become a student of God's Word. Read it, study it, meditate upon it, memorize it, live it. A little girl complained that she had stomachache. "That's because it's empty. You'll feel better when you've got something in it," said her mother. Later that day, during a visit from the pastor, he complained of a severe headache. The little girl perked up and said, "That's because it's empty. You'll feel better when you've got something in it." There is a truth there for every child of God. Never forget the Bible is addressed primarily to the mind, to the understanding. Cream puff Christianity might taste good, but it will not build you up. Most of us have scores of ways to find help. Secondly, refuse cultural accommodation. We need to question everything in our culture by asking, is this biblical? Or am I succumbing to cultural pressures? We need to ask this about the entertainment we participate in, the books we read, the movies we watch, the financial goals we set, the consumerism we adopt, everything. And thirdly, have the courage to stand alone if necessary. There may come a time when everyone around you, even your fellow evangelicals, are caving in. Don't be afraid to stand alone. This is spiritual warfare we're talking about today, and the evil one is doing a number on the church of Jesus Christ. Regarding doctrine and behavior, apostasy is everywhere around us. Though we already know all this, we need the reminder.